Mongolia once said, President Elbador, he once said that democracy literally means the power of the people. Democracy is not about politics, it is about the people. The more that people participate in democracy, the more democratic countries become. Communities discriminated on work and dissent face and continue to face deliberate exclusion while they try to participate in democratic processes. Due to their socio-economic and political positions that have been reinforced over generations, the fruits of democracy remain unripened for them. It is only by increasing the participation of marginalized people like CDWD that we can realize the fundamental ideals of justice and equality. Using the platform of the Asia Democracy Assembly, the objective of today's event is to bring CDWD rights activists and advocates together in order to navigate solutions to the injustices and issues that are faced specifically by CDWD when it comes to their demands for justice as well as democratic rights. This webinar will be in two parts. The first hour will look at the specific issues faced by DWD communities in different countries across Asia. And this session will be moderated by Dr. Sonu, who's the chair of Pakistan Dalit Solidarity Network. The second hour will look at a way forward, focusing on four thematic issues, which are gender justice, financial justice, environment, and CDWD, and the access to justice and CDWD. This session will be moderated by Ms. Preena Palikal, General Secretary of the National Campaign for Dalit Human Rights and Dalit Adhikar Andolan here in India. I now hand it over to Dr. Sonuji to start the session. Thank you.
Yeah, before we start this session, Sonuji, just let me in for a minute. There are a few quick announcements that I need to make. I had shared my personal link with many of people over here, and they've joined in as panelists. I'd request them to change their screen name to their original name, and this would help us to put you as attendees. The other thing is we have interpretation here that's in Hindi only. So we have Hindi interpretation. You can access the interpretation through the interpretation key, which is available right at the bottom of your screens. हिंदी में बताना चाहूंगा आप के पास यहाँ पे हिंदी इंटरप्रिटेशन अवेलेबल है, जो आपको आपके स्क्रीन के बॉटम के अंदर आपको इंटरप्रिटेशन की मिलेगा, जिससे आप एक्सेस कर सकते हैं. जो हिंदी इंटरप्रिटेशन है वो आपको नेपाली चैनल पे सुनने को मिल जाएगा. Yeah, this would be okay. Yeah, all over to Sonuji now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and welcome to everybody, and welcome to the panelists in this first session. Let me say a few things about the session, and then introduce the panelists first, and then we will let them talk for minutes, 5 to 10 minutes, and then see if there are any questions. We will take up into the end of the session. And we believe that democracy is close to our heart, as we have been foremost and at most discriminated in the political processes. So we are excluded in many times.
I guess Sonoji is dropped from this meeting.
Can somebody continue to take this session? Why don't Nayanthara or Dipanshu please continue? Maybe he'll join after that.
Yeah. Nayanthara, I'd request you to take over from here. You need to unmute yourself.
Sorry, apologies. We'll start the session with our first speaker for today. We have Ms. Tamanna Baraik from Bangladesh. Is Tamanna here?
Yeah, Tamanna ji is here, but she has joined through my link. So I'd request Tamanna ji to switch on her video, please.
Tamanna, can you switch on your video? Just to tell you about Tamanna, Tamanna belongs to the tea plantation community in Bangladesh. She's an avid activist in Bangladesh for the rights of Dalit women, and has worked on drafting the Anti-Discrimination Act in 2013 as well. And she currently serves as the Secretary of International Affairs at Bangladesh Dalit and Excluded Rights Movement. We're so happy to have Tamanna here. Can I hand it over to her to speak about the situation in Bangladesh? Over to you, Tamanna.
Can you please also change your name, Tamanna ji? Or somebody else can change it for her.
It's okay. Let her. I think Dipanshu, you can change it for her. Yeah. You go ahead, Tamanna.
Thank you so much. Distinguished panelists, moderator, organizers, and participants, greetings from Bangladesh. I am Tamanna Singh Baraik. My organization name is Bangladesh Dalit and Excluded Rights Movement, BDERM. I represent Dalit community in Bangladesh. First, I like to express my gratitude and thanks for letting me to speak about Dalits in Bangladesh. Caste discrimination preliminarily affects the minority Hindu population of Bangladesh, but has also spread to some Muslim communities. The estimates of the number of Dalits in Bangladesh approximately from 6.5 million. Most of the countries, millions of Dalits are poor and marginalized with extremely limited access to education, employment, housing, health, and public service. Dalit women are subjected to discrimination because of their caste, gender, and low economic status. For too long, the situation of the Dalit population was ignored by the country's authorities. In recent years, the Dalits have started to claim their human rights. The Dalit movement in Bangladesh has made progress and the government is paying more attention to their rights. However, a lack of disaggregated data on the Dalit population hampers efforts to present a clear picture of their situation. Equality and participation. Dalits live on the very fingers of Bangladesh society in urban areas. They are often segregated in colonies and unhygienic slum areas with the limited access to the most basic amenities, including water and sanitation. Being landless, they may also be forced to live in abundant fields or on government-owned land. Dalits face exclusion and discrimination in many walks of life. Because of their caste status, they are assigned in poorly paid and traditional so-called dirty jobs. Dalits face exclusion from educational establishments and they face obstacles when accessing health service. Dalits are also very poorly represented in politics. They have even faced violence when trying to cast their vote. The vast majority are not involved with the political parties. As a rare exception, 2 Dalit men have become government ministers without revealing their caste identity. Hindu constitute less than 9% of Bangladesh, more than 165 million population. Though there have been several attacks on religious minority in the past, community leaders say this is the most large-scale move violence against the community in the country history. Recent 13 October 2021, the annual Hindu religious festival Durga Puja time, communal attack in the town of Kumilla. Within hours of rumor spreading on social media, hundreds of Muslim fundamentalists went on a rampage targeting Hindu religious pavilions in Kumilla. Soon the violence spread to the other parts of Bangladesh, such as Rangpur district's Pirganj Upazila. Dalits, fishermen's 20 families was communal attack. Data on extent of COVID-19 on the Dalit communities. COVID-19 pandemic has impacted negatively on the livelihood of Dalits. According to a rapid assessment conducted in 35 districts by Nagari Udyog and Bangladesh Dalit and Exploited Right Movement, approximately 136,144 Dalit families lost their jobs, which includes jobs like cleaning, shoe repairing, small business, van and rickshaw pulling, hairdressing, cloth washing, etc. A total of 279 people, men 168, women 96, children 50 from the Dalit community have been infected by COVID-19. Out of 279 infected people, 14 persons so far have died. The number may be higher than this. We have not yet been able to collect all information. Despite getting infected by COVID-19, it remains a major challenge for Dalits to have access to quarantine facilities. Almost all the urban Dalits in Bangladesh live on colonies where they are entitled to use only one room for one family consists of 4 to 5 members. 30% Dalits were found practicing the health rules partiality and 40% Dalits were practicing and health rules. 60% of the COVID-19 positive Dalits said that they weren't given much importance by the doctors while going for treatment. 30% said that they could not see the doctors due to lack of money. 10% were found not interested to see a doctor as they consider it as normal flu. Though the coronavirus infection and death rate among Dalit women are comparatively low, however, the community are the worst victim of financial income loss. In urban settings, one family having 5 members lives in one room, and the room size on average is around 120 square feet. So they have to stay in a small place. On the other hand, becoming jobless and staying at home for a long time for more than 2 months proved to be tremendous physiological pressure for Dalit men, which resulted in domestic violence. The day laborers and low-wage earning groups among the Dalit community become jobless due to the shutdown declared by the government. As a result, they severely suffer to earn a livelihood. However, the Bangladesh government, different international NGO and local development people extend their support to the vulnerable Dalit families. Bangladesh government, along with some international NGOs like UNDP, ActionAid, HEX, BCS officers, Association Nagari Udyog, Manusher Jonno Foundation, some MPs, BDRM and local development people provided food support to the Dalit community all over the Bangladesh. Civil society organizations have been very active from the first day of COVID-19 infection in Bangladesh. The CSO, with the support of international
Tamana,
organizations,
you have only now 2 minutes, please.
okay, organized awareness campaign to prevent COVID-19. CD, ARM, and Nagorik Udyog published 50,000 awareness leaflets and 10,000 posters to circulate among the Dalit communities. Vaccination. In Bangladesh, vaccination registration is online, but Dalit community have no idea how they do registration, lack of information in Dalit community. Mass people vaccination started at 7 February 2021. This is for doctor, nurse, and in front warrior like police and above of 55 ages people. In September, vaccination is limit started from 25 years old. Now, school students are allowed to take vaccination. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tamana. It's very nice. Elaborated the issues and problems of the Dalit community facing in Bangladesh. Now, let me introduce Rahul Singh, is around, I guess. Thank you, Rahul, for being with us. Rahul is currently General Secretary of the National Dalit Movement of Pakistan, Movement for Justice. He's fueled by this passion to work for the cause of Dalit and Adivasis. He is an expert on Scheduled Caste and Scheduled Tribes Act, particularly in 1989, and Rules 1995, and carries over a decade of extensive experience in Dalit human rights monitoring. And he has so many other things related to this field, the Dalit and Adivasis, very expert, and he has been engaged in a lot of research papers and the implementation of multi-stakeholder programs. So I welcome Rahul Singh sir. Please share your thoughts.
Thank you, Sonu. Jai Bhim, Johar, friends, and thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to speak in this very important assembly, which is Asia Democracy Assembly. Friends, around 202 million Dalits and possibly many more constitute more than 18% of India's population. And more human rights violations against Dalits are committed in India than anywhere else in the world. India also has the most progressive legal safeguards against caste-based discrimination. And it is in India that you will find the strongest Dalit resistance against the caste discrimination. When Dalits assert their rights, the response of dominant caste is often brutal, and they are subjected to atrocities and untouchability practices. In recent years, Dalit movement has taken its struggle to the international arena, and caste discrimination is now on the international human rights agenda. There is also growing recognition that India cannot achieve the UN's Sustainable Development Goal unless the issue is properly addressed. In India, the rights they enjoy on paper are often disregarded, and their access to employment, education, health services, political participation, and justice is limited. Due to poverty and marginalization, their life expectancy is much shorter than that of the average non-Dalit Indian. Although they are allocated seats in elected bodies, Dalits are often denied this right. Lack of education and wealth, as well as discrimination by dominant caste, prevent them from meaningful political participation. The problem is particularly urgent for Dalit women. Now, coming to caste and gender justice, Dalit women and girls are considered easy targets for violence and rape, as the perpetrators are rarely convicted. Many are forced into modern forms of slavery, and some are even born into temple prostitution. Educated Dalit women continuously face discrimination on the academic front and in private workplaces. Nearly 64% of Dalit women graduates, including vocational, diploma, or certificate courses, are earning significantly less than dominant caste women, holding same qualifications. Now, coming to the business and human rights. Legal framework in India prohibits forced and bonded labor, but this practice is widespread in India and constitutes a form of caste-based slavery. Forced and bonded labor is prevalent in agriculture, where it is linked to caste hierarchies, but also in forestry, fishing, mining, brick making, domestic work, cleaning, and the textile industries in India. Dalit children are also particularly vulnerable to child labor and trafficking. And researchers in India have found that child laborers in India are predominantly Dalits. Dalit women and girls are particularly vulnerable to this form of exploitation. Now, in India, we have a very special law, progressive law, for preventing atrocities against Dalits and Adivasis, that is the Prevention of Atrocities Act 1989 and Rules 1995. But I mean, every year the crimes against Dalits and Adivasis are increasing, and this specific law speaks about the compensation and rehabilitation measures, but the implementation, however, remains extremely weak, and the accused mostly get away with the crimes and discrimination against Dalits. Caste discrimination and caste practices within the police system, judicial system, and prisons continues to be widespread. Now, in conclusion, the Dalit movement in India has come a long way in the past few decades in its struggle for equality and human rights, but much remains to be done. And the sad reality is that the majority of India's Dalits are still subjected to caste discrimination. Hence, it is more important than ever that the international community continues to pay attention to one of the world's most serious human rights issues in India. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Brief and very elaborative on the issues of Dalits and the democracy in constituency. Thank you very much. Let me introduce the next speaker, the Bhakta Bishwakarma, who is from Nepal. He is the chairperson of Dalit NGO Federation, in addition to serving as a national chair of NDF. Mr. Bhakta is also an executive board member. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. Executive board member of the Dalit Asia Dalit Rights Forum, and advocate and founder of the Legal Rights Protectionist Society in Nepal. He is well recognized in Dalit human rights activist and has been working over last 2 decades helping and create international network and alliance, and also for their own community. So Bhakta ji, welcome, and please have your thoughts next 5 minutes.
So Sonoji, can I just have half a second?
Yeah, please.
Before Bhakta ji finishes. Can we focus on democracy and the rights of democracy? I'm sure Bhakta ji is doing, but one, definitely we are talking about communities and their issues, but as we speak, can we also say, how do we strengthen the democracy through the rights of the communities discriminated on work conditions? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul ji. I think that's exactly what I was thinking, that speaker should focus a little more on the democracy and its issues. Thank you. Over to Bhakta ji.
Thank you, Sonoji. Yeah, good morning to all. Yeah, this is Bhakta Bishwakarma from Nepal. Yeah, I think the democracy and democratic movement and the Dalits is for Nepal is simultaneously we are emerging democratic movement and the Dalit movement together, which has been more than 8 decades. So that means 80 years. So we have been struggling for the democracy and the Dalit rights together. So I think after the democracy, we are having different, 6 different constitutions, and now we are ruling under the 7th constitution. So that constitution is, Republican constitution ever we have in the country. So I think the constitution, 1990 constitution, slightly opened the space for marginalized communities like Dalits. So we started our representation after 1990 constitution. So after that constitution also not enough for marginalized people perspective. So there was a Maoist insurgency and the 19 days people's movement in the country. So that movement overthrew the royal dynasty from Nepal and established Republican Nepal. And that Republican Nepal enacted a new constitution that is 2015, so which is a recent constitution. That constitution, widened the space for most of the marginalized people, including Dalits. So basically, if we are talking about the democracy, definitely we have to talk about the electoral process and election system. So that electoral process and election system, we are applying parallel system in Nepal. That mostly the South Asian people, we are also raising these issues. We have to have a full representation system, full proportional representation system in the South Asian country that allow us to our proportional participation in every structure of the governance, not only the political parties, but also the state structure, political parties, and the governance, bureaucracy, and others. So that is the issues that we have to highlight. And in Nepal, if you go with we have a parallel system. That parallel system combines with the first past the post system and the PR system. So first past the post is a FPTP, we called FPTP, and also the PR system, that are proportional representation system. So we have that proportional representation system and the PR system. In the PR system in Nepal, we have a full proportional, like a 13.8% Dalit population according to the 2011 census, but now census is going on. We don't know how what would be the next statistics for Dalit community in Nepal, but now till date, so we have a 13.8% population for Dalit community. So we have a 13.8% representation in the parliament, the provincial parliament, assembly, federal parliament. We have that 13.8% representation. So, but first past the post, we don't have any provision, reservation provision, quota provision in the first past the post. So that is creating a vacuum for our representation. So altogether, almost, let's say 6-7% participation we have secured in the parliament, but out of 13.8%. So that means half of the participation we have secured in the parliament. But good thing, let me share one good thing in the local level. Like a local level, we have a 753 local units. That local units, and we have a more than 7,000 ward. That is the very foundation unit of the elected body, and that body we have our Dalit women representation. That is there are 4 member in the ward, but out of 4, so 1 would be the Dalit women. So that is the very good beginning we have for the political process in Nepal. But if you go with the, they are exercising the power, exercising, decision-making power, and budgeting or many other things. So there is lack. So I think we have to work on that area as well. But that is, I think we have to, in South Asia, I think we need to replicate that provision in the local level that would allow us to, grooming the leadership, especially the women leadership, and then in future we'll have a more women leadership in the parliament or different state structure. But I think somehow we have a electrocracy. Most of the time I'm talking about the what is differences between democracy and the electrocracy. So electrocracy is a just means for bringing the people, the head of the people into the position. But if you talk about the democracy is not just about the electing into the position and getting the position, but rather it is to utilize the basic fundamental rights that provides the constitution or allow the constitution and the human rights instrument. So whether people are getting those type of fundamental rights or not. So that is questionable in Nepal.
Bhaktaji, 2 minutes more.
Okay, okay, sir. So that is questionable for Nepal, because people are still facing discrimination, lot of discrimination, violence, and displacement, killing, threatening, lot of exploitation Dalit people are facing. So they are utilizing their fundamental rights or not? Not, because they are facing discrimination, and they are not living their dignified lives. So that, I think, a lot of inequality in various state structure and various governance positions. So I mean, poverty, if you go with the poverty, so 0.5% of population, almost half, not a half, but almost 0.5% of population, they are under the poverty line. So that is, I mean, some indicator. So if you go with the health, if you go with the education and the land rights and the, I mean, social protection schemes, I mean, various things, Constitution guarantees that, because under the Article 40 Constitution of Nepal guarantees the rights of Dalits, and it ensures economic, social, and cultural rights for Dalit communities, but the law has not enacted yet to implement those fundamental rights. So that means still people are not utilizing or exercising their fundamental rights. If you go with the access to justice, obviously the access to justice is, I mean, the very questionable in Nepal, and the impunity is growing day by day. So rule of law is not in place, especially for Dalit communities. Many people, they are discriminated in the temple, or killing, or massacre, or you know the Rukum cases, and recently in temple, worshipping into the temple in the Chittagong district, so one guy has been, I mean, killed. So I mean, there are a lot of atrocities happening despite having a constitutional and legislative safeguarding. So if you go with the, I mean, political participation, I think full now Dalit movement has consistently raising the issues of full proportional representation into the political process. So that movement is going on. And also another thing, we need to work on, very hard work on decapacitating the Dalit leaders, whether they are civil society leader, whether they are the political leader, women leader, local level or federal level. So all the, I think we need to capacitate them to maximum, optimum exercising their political rights, democratic rights, fundamental rights into the practice, and also the governance process. I think that issues we are trying to have, building in our Dalit movement in Nepal. And also the final, I think it's my final statement, that is the departure for the building democracy, that is the Constitution of Nepal. So I think we have to work so hard to effectively implementing the constitutional rights, fundamental rights that is enshrined into the Constitution, as well as other various legislation that is promoting marginalized people and the Dalit people into the democratic process, into the political process. So I think in that area, I think we need to work, and also we need to promote, strengthen our state institutions like National Dalit Commission and other commission and other institutions. So that I think we need to work hard in future to promoting Dalit people into the political process, into the democratic process.
Thank you.
Then they can exercise. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bhaktaji. Very much. Thank you, Bhaktaji. My next speaker is Mr. Gyanchand. Let me introduce him. Gyanchand is coming from a very modest scheduled caste background. He has been a very politically active. He enjoyed provincial assembly as a member in the past, and very recently he retired as a senator from the upper house of Pakistan. Currently, he is the president of Pakistan People's Parties in one district. So he enjoys a sort of, mainstreaming power from the political point of view. And he has been very, very active Dalit leader and active in the community that he has been coming from. he has a journey of over now 30 years in politics, and also he has been a very good active student leader. So I believe his contribution in democracy has a very big way to go, and he has been very contributing a lot in the past as well. Over to you, Gyanchand sir, your thoughts on the democracy. We can't hear you. I think your sound is can you unmute, please?
Oh,
Sorry, now you can.
hello. So thank you, Dr. Sonu sir, and whole team of organizers of this event. So democracy certainly provided some opportunities everywhere, especially in Pakistan. So I have honor that I remained member of Provincial Assembly as well as Upper House of Pakistan. Also, I have tried to contest the general elections and challenge the Vadera feudal of the area. And I succeeded to get votes from upper caste of Hindus as well as those feudals whose mind is caste discriminated, and they were earlier not accepting the candidature of mine. So, however, as well as Constitution of Pakistan is concerned, it provides equal opportunities to all the citizens of Pakistan, but practically it is not. While we are discussing the religious and political system of Pakistan, Pakistan is a religious country. Constitutionally, it is a Islamic Republic of Pakistan, and president as well as prime minister cannot be non-Muslim. But they have provided some opportunities to non-Muslims, and also from these opportunities, some of the Dalit leaders, scheduled caste leaders has got benefits. As I was the member of Provincial Assembly and Senate. Presently, our two scheduled caste leaders, Mr. Surendra Valasai and Madam Kirshana Kohli. Surendra Valasai is a member of Provincial Assembly and a special assistant to Chief Minister of Sindh, and Kirshana Kohli is a member of Senate Upper House. But the ratio of parliamentarian on reserved seats for non-Muslims it's not good. Especially the scheduled castes are not getting their due share. You see, in Pakistan, and the 4 provincial assemblies and National Assembly and Senate, there are 36 seats reserved for non-Muslims, while there are only 2 parliamentarians from scheduled caste and some are from Christian community, but they don't have even 10% of total seats they have. But almost the people having financial background and upper caste, because of upper caste, they have social contacts with elite of power elites. They get nominated on these seats, and scheduled caste cannot get this opportunity as per their share. So at present, if we are considering the democratic system, somehow it had provided the opportunities to scheduled caste. The value of vote has increased, and Vadera's feudal lords are feeling that while they are going to elections, the Dalits, the scheduled caste, and communities, unprivileged communities, are equally important for them in sense of electing them to the power corridors. While for nomination or providing tickets to the these unprivileged people, Dalits or scheduled caste, they can't get the equal share because of their financial positions. My party, Pakistan People's Party, is a liberal party, and it had provided some of opportunities to the scheduled caste and unprivileged people. They have given some chances to be the members of provincial assemblies as well as Senate. But while we are discussing the other parties, they don't have even a one member for the 80% population of scheduled castes among the non-Muslims or Hindus. So overall, the society has not given the opportunities as per their rights. Only scheduled caste girls get priorities while marrying them forcefully, or getting them abducted and then marrying them. So otherwise they are untouchables. The places, prime places, though they are not prohibited to enter, but they are separate for upper castes. Their social relations are also not with the scheduled castes or lower castes as they have. We don't have the friends in an upper caste or Vadera class. We feel that they discriminate at each level. While we go to the parliamentary and cabinets, we don't have any member, fresh minister in the cabinet of whole of Pakistan. Though we have the equal estate trust in only Sindh, some of the our friends have they are a special assistant to the chief minister. I think the society of Pakistan has also the discriminations. The discrimination is in the roots of the society of subcontinent. So it prevails in Pakistan also. I think when we the people, unprivileged people, scheduled caste and Dalits, given equal opportunities in competitive exams, in education, we have proved ourselves not less than anyone else, but we have proved ourselves more intelligent than the other communities. But the people are discriminated, and they are getting not the prioritized, even they are discriminated and discouraged while nominating them in different jobs, or even
Gansab, you have 2
getting
minutes.
some opportunities. So I think in general, the problems of whole subcontinent are same. We are all victims of this discrimination and caste system, especially caste system. But in Pakistan, comparatively, we feel better than other part of the region, because there are some opportunities of going to the power corridors. But democracy has favored the people of lower communities, Dalit communities. The power of vote has changed some of mindset of upper caste and feudals. So I think democracy, in some way, democracy is the solution of our priorities. So I think we should have to focus on getting the share of power through democracy. But the financial status is a hindrance within getting the power. So generally, I am of opinion that with all the discriminations and all the law and constitutional equalities, we are facing discrimination, and we have to work so long to get rid of this discrimination. Thank you, Dr. Somsa.
Thank you, Gyan Saab. It's indeed very elaborative. Let me also say a few things that, you know, this democracy has inbuilt exclusion because of poverty, because of vulnerability, because of vices, the absence of the vices. Therefore, the Dalit community cannot participate as they should be. The only, I think now there has been a voter, constituencies and voting of these communities have been getting significance. So I guess in coming year, the process, if the democracy process is going on, we may have some place in some time. Thank you. The next speaker is from Sri Lanka. She is Yada Sharna. If I Yadarna Sharna something, if I'm pronounced the right name. She is the Tamil politician, and she is now deputy mayor of Navana Ilia, Sri Lanka, her hometown. And she is the first Tamil woman who got selected as a council member, and first Tamil woman as well as a deputy mayor. So we welcome Yudha Sharma. Please, floor is
thank
yours.
You, Doctor. Thank you, Doctor.
Floor is yours. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Doctor.
Sorry to interrupt. Sorry to interrupt, Yada Sharma ji. We had been trying to promote you to the panel list. However, apparently it is being denied from your end. If you could just accept that, and so that we can see you as well. Yeah, please.
Did I? Can you hear me?
You need to join. I'm giving you the permission to join as a panelist. Yeah, you.
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
Did I?
Okay.
Okay. Now you can hear me. Can you see me?
No, we can't see you. But if you open your video,
okay,
we can hear you though very clearly.
Have you opened the video, Yada Sharma?
Yeah, please. You are now a panelist, and you can start your mic and video now.
There you are. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Doctor. Thank you so much. And such a pleasure to join all of you, and a pleasant good morning to all of you. As a Tamil, we have normally called as the Indian origin Tamils in Sri Lanka, plantation women. I am part of a plantation family. My grandmother was working in the plantation, and my dad has come out of it, and he's a politician as well. And it's an honor to be here with all of you and talk about my people and my community. It has been more than 300, almost close to 300 years. Our community is in Sri Lanka from India. And it's still we don't have the basic human rights and the democracy that normally that people should have. So that is one thing. It's always lacking. And with all these things, after I think more than 100 years of history to my hometown, so all these 100 years, the Tamil community has been here. Living in my hometown, Nuwara in Sri Lanka. I'm the first woman to enter the local government and to become the deputy mayor. So from that, we can see how hard it must be and to come up as Tamils in Sri Lanka. We always have that issue, and especially when it's coming to upcountry women, they normally call us tea pluckers. We still live in line rooms, and without having the basic facilities, what normally that everybody is having. We still fight for the wages. We still fight for the basic human rights and every single thing. With all that, our women is supporting to the Sri Lankan economy. They are doing a major part as a tea export country in Sri Lanka. So with all this, I just wanted to talk about the basic democracy is lacking. The lacking democracy that we have in our community, the ladies, the basic things from the childhood up till to the end of our life, that normal things, the education, the health, every single thing. Even though the top ladies are doing a major part in the Sri Lankan economy, we don't even get the basic things, basic education for our kids properly. The health-wise, we don't get the proper health facilities. Since all these tea estates are in the hill side, so basic things, even the roads, we don't have for transport, for the schools, and the teachers, even basically the teachers don't even want to come and stay in the tea plantation area because to give education because of lack facilities they get. All these things are affecting our people, even though there are parliamentarians in a parliament, more than 10 of them, but still for all these years we couldn't achieve anything. You can say that still our people are living in line homes. Everything, or even when we having this pandemic situation in the world, even the almost the island is totally locked down. So even plantation, only the plantation women were working. So, plantation women is working in the pandemic situation also, because the managers couldn't allow them to stay home because we don't get wages, otherwise these ladies can't survive. Those kind of things are basically affecting our people from more than 150 years. We couldn't speak out. We don't have voice in any places that we can tell them the problems and issues that we are having in a plantation area. Even though there are that, as I said, we have parliamentarians. I don't know how far they are. They can give their voice as the community people to prevent all these problems. So basic things what we have here, the basic things, the issues, still for more than 100 years we are facing the same problem. We still have the same problem. World has changed a whole lot of different way. Even these days, even kids are doing online classes. Our kids don't have that kind of facilities. Most of the areas, they don't have electricity supplies or mobile phones. So we are facing those kind of issues, are still basic human things we couldn't still give to the people. Even toilet facilities, you can say, though even for the pregnant ladies, the proper meal. So as the plantation ladies are facing the basic fundamental rights, it has been never given to them. So that's all that I would like to tell, that is the situation is going on in a plantation. Thank you so much.
It's very nice. You elaborated everything, which the problems that Tamil community faced and the tea community faced in Sri Lanka. I don't know. We have a next speaker from Malaysia. Is he around? Or is somebody voice there?
No, Sonuji, we don't have anyone joining from Malaysia now. We can move to the next session.
So, Sonuji, I just want to say 2 minutes on the Malaysian. Recently, we, as Asia Dalit Rights Forum, did a survey which was done by the National Human Rights Commission of Malaysia, one Mr. Gerald Joseph. And he brought out clearly the issues of the communities discriminated on work and descent, especially those who have, like what Ms. Yadarshana ji has said in Sri Lanka. Similar issues have been there in Malaysia. They have got their citizenship, but still there are issues concerning their fundamental rights. And even though sometimes the law says the implementation of full equality rights have not sufficiently been there on the one hand. On the other hand, there are issues between the communities of dominant caste and Dalit caste within the Malaysian Indian origin population. Not only just India, I think there are from other communities, somewhere also from Bangladesh, Dalits are there. So these have been brought out in the report, and unfortunately they are not able to participate, but I have been requested to just convey this. I can share later the report. I think either Nayantara or Dipanshu could share the report of Malaysia Dalits in this for wider distribution. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Palji. Anybody from the panelists that they spoke have question, please put this question to the chat box, and then Nashu will consolidate them, and then we will put forward to the panelists. I once again thank you very much all the panelists who contributed a lot, and they gave their time and spoke very well. And I say goodbye now to the session. Thank you.
Hi, there's just an announcement to make. If anyone who's there with any questions, kindly put them in the chat box and we'll try to answer them all. In the next session, we are having Ms. Beena Parikal as our moderator. I'd kindly request her to take the floor now.
Thank you, Dipanshu. And thank you for the first panel and Sonuji for that excellent moderation and for the for bringing out the issues that marginalized communities face during in a democracy. So what is a democracy? I think this whole the agenda of today's webinar is on deepening democracy. And for me personally, democracy is something that is in the hands of people. I mean, it's the people who decide, who they want to elect. It's the people who decide who should govern the country. So the transformation of a country through a democratic process. Sorry. Hello. So the transformation of a country through a democratic process is and should be always in the hands of the people. But who are these people? Most of the time, this is in the hands, the power is always in the hands of a certain amount of people, or the dominant caste. When we're talking in this region, in the South Asia region, most of the time that power is in the hands of the dominant caste. According to Noam Chomsky, what he says is, in this possibly terminal phase of human existence, democracy and freedom are more than just ideals to be valued. They may be essential to survival. So we have to be able to survive, we have to have a very active and a democracy that allows people to critique, to break down if it's not working and rebuild. And that power has to be there in the hands of people, but people not being in a homogeneous group. Therefore, who are these people? People discriminated by work and descent, minorities in many of these countries, and people affected by caste in South Asia. But I'd like to move on to the panelists, before which I'd like to say in Michelle Bachelet, who said that for me, a better democracy is a democracy where women not only have the right to vote, but they're also have the right to be elected. And that's a democracy if we're talking about a democracy and a healthy democracy where we have participation of all people of all castes and creed and also people of all genders. So I'd go to now my panelists. We have Ms. Abhirami Jyotishwaran, who is currently the General Secretary of the All India Dalit Mahila Adhikar Manch. She has advocated and lobbied for bringing about the amendment to the SC/ST Prevention of Atrocities Act in 2015. And she has also promoted the campaign on zero discrimination in school education to bring the policy to ensure a non-discrimination and safety environment in educational institutions. We also have with us Mr. Sultan Mohammad Salahuddin Siddique. Sultan Mohammad Salahuddin Siddique is a young social science researcher from Bangladesh. He earned his bachelor's and master's degrees in education from the University of Dhaka. His current areas of interest for research include social justice, education, social inclusion, and marginalization, and currently is with the Nagorik Udyog, an organization that works on Dalit rights. Mr. Harjeet Singh is a global expert on the issues of climate impact, migration, and adaptation, and has been supporting countries across the world on tackling climate change. He also acts as a strategic advisor to the global partnerships to the fossil fuel non-proliferation treaty initiative. Until recently, he has led ActionAid International's climate change work globally. He's also the member of the United Nations Technical Expert Group on Comprehensive Risk Management under the Warsaw International Mechanism for Loss and Damage. Do we have Ms. Bhagwani Rathore? I don't know if she's there, but she's also a member of PDSN Pakistan.
We don't have Bhagwani as well.
We do? We don't?
No, we don't.
Okay. I'd request Abhirami ji to please take the floor now. And I would also request all panelists to give one recommendation on how you can deepen democracy through what you speak. Abhirami.
Thank you, Veena. Thank you for organizing this for this program. I would like to see the gender justice within the democratic framework. As we all know, mainly my thing is going to speak on Dalit women by keeping the Indian context. So the democracy, we know how India has able to get, even after 75 years of independence, what is our status of gender justice within this democratic framework. When we look into it, we all aware that in India, Dalit women constitute around 10 crore of population. But what is the context? How they have been facing multiple form of discrimination and oppression because of caste, class, and gender. When we speak about gender and patriarchy, we cannot negotiate, we cannot neglect the Brahminical patriarchy, as we all aware. Because of this Brahminical patriarchy, among women, Dalit women are the worst sufferers of various forms of untouchability, discrimination, oppression, and violence. So when we see how we have a progressive constitution, we know that Article 14, which speaks about equality, and Article 17, which speaks about abolition of untouchability practices. But even in these years, when we see there are various forms of untouchability practices, and because whenever the people assert their right, they are faced multiple forms of oppression and also the violences. So when we see because of these various existing forms of untouchability, atrocities increases, and even when we see the differences between the Dalit women faces, more than 9 Dalit women are subjected to rape, the only form of rape. And when we see about gang rape, physical assault, and other things, there are various incidents occurs. So the increases in atrocities is also one of the major issue of Dalit women in India. Apart from that, when we see we see how we have that employment rate. When we see education, the 99% are enrolled in primary education, but when it comes to the higher education, it is just 15.6% are able to complete. The Dalit women are able to complete their higher education. So the education plays a critical role in the democratic country to access, to participate, to make a decision in their own process. So when we see 99% are increasing, but there is a significant decline in the higher education. So it ends with 15.6%. So how it affects the democratic country in India, we can able to see. And when we see the land ownership is also a main important position for the women, especially Dalit women, to make their decision. When we see there is no much data, government data available, how much of Dalit women are holding their land. Assertion of land ownership is also, data is not available. It just says only 12% of Dalit are having the land. So this is also another thing, how a Dalit women will be able to participate in this democratic process to make her decision in a effective manner. When we see, apart from this, when we also have a reservation in a political thing, and we know in the panchayat there are Dalit women are participation, but what is there, how they are able to exercise? Even today, due to the existence of untouchability practice, they are not allowed to sit equally with other dominant caste people within the panchayat. Though she is elected as a panchayat sarpanch, she is not able to sit equal position, and also exercising, like hosting the flag, national flag during this Independence Day or Republic Day or any national festival. She is not allowed to host the flag. She has made to wait till the secretary, in which major of the people are from the dominant caste, the secretaries comes, till that the Dalit women are made to wait till the secretary come to hoist the flag. So this is how in that we can see the various situations in the existing democratic things. And I would also say, when we come to the Lok Sabha, the parliament, the representation of Dalit women, we are just 2.2% of the Dalit women are totally participating in the representing in the local Lok Sabha. So this is how, even we have more than 543 seats, just 12 Dalit women are represented in Lok Sabha. So it clearly says how the representation is minimal. And if you look into their effectiveness and their representation, it is again a question mark as we speak in Panchayat Raj. When coming to the Rajya Sabha, there is no reservation till now for Dalit women. So there is not even 1% of Dalit women are in the Rajya Sabha in the Indian Parliament. So we can see how reservation is very important for the Dalit women to represent her at least to some extent, and exercising it's very difficult for her even after 75 years of independence. So keeping this as a view of it, it is necessary for us to work towards the democratic thing, which makes the equal participation and their exercise the thing. So annihilation of caste, the caste-based discrimination, which divides the people based on the work and descent, it should be important for us to annihilate it, so that, and the policies and schemes that are already existing should be effectively implemented, and the people the officials who fails to implement this, who has a caste prejudice in their mind on implementing these policies for effective implementation and participation, should be taken action. So with these two recommendations, I would like to end my thing. Thank you so much. Jai Bhim to all.
Thank you very much, Abhirami. I think she has brought in the whole aspect of barriers for Dalit women and women from women discriminated on work and descent in accessing these democratic processes that are there in India. And I think it's similar situation across the South Asia as well. Now we will go to Mr. Siddiqui. If you can come, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Veena ji, for giving me the floor. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Greetings to everyone. when we think about the GWD communities from the perspective of Bangladesh, the community that comes to our mind is the Dalit. The social structure of Bangladesh has made them segregated and highly dependable on their traditional jobs. The Dalits in Bangladesh are usually engaged in different kinds of menial jobs, such as cleaning, manual scavenging, hairdressing, and leather processing. For being involved these sort of manual jobs, they have to face untouchability in the society. Most of the Dalits in Bangladesh are working in informal sector. For working in informal sector, they don't have a fixed monthly salary as well as they don't have job security. That is why they have to become financially vulnerable if any contingency occurs. Especially, we have to talk about the pandemic situation, the COVID pandemic that occurred in 2020. Most of the Dalits who were in informal sector lost their jobs and their monthly income had decreased, which pushed them towards the edge of financial marginalization. They suffered a lot, and we went to different Dalit colonies, and we saw that they don't have foods, they don't have ability to get healthcare facilities for having no money in their pockets. It is important to spell out that a little portion of Dalits are engaged in government jobs. Nearly all of them are working as cleaners in different government departments and institutions, not other clerical jobs, only cleaning jobs. Nowadays, non-Dalits are also taking jobs as cleaners in these sectors. As a result, getting these cleaning jobs is also becoming difficult for the Dalits. So their number in government jobs is also decreasing. Again, the education rate among the Dalits is very low in Bangladesh. According to a source, only 30% of Dalit children get enrolled in the schools. And among these 30% of children, most of them do not continue their studies after completing the primary level due to their familial incapability, familial economical incapability. Moreover, due to social segregation for Dalit identity, they are also deprived of attaining various technical and vocational skills. As a result, the unemployment rate is also gradually increasing in Dalit communities. According to an unofficial data, at present, in 2021, more than 7 million Dalit have been living in Bangladesh. Although low education rate, lack of skills, high unemployment rate, all things are prevalent among Dalits, the government of Bangladesh yet has not taken any comprehensive development initiative to minimize the existing sufferings and to ensure the financial well-being of the Dalits communities. However, the government allocated a budget under the Social Safety Net program. This allocation is barely sufficient to address the need of the Dalits. If we critically look at the existing situation here in Bangladesh, we can see that the Dalits are trapped in a vicious cycle of financial exclusion, and they don't have the key in their hand to change their irony, as they do not have political representation both at local level and national level. The social structure, the high dependency of Dalits on traditional jobs, the untouchability notion, low education rate, lack of skills, high unemployment rate, these all things together have pushed the Dalits toward low income margin and made them financially marginalized. To improve the existing status, the first thing is to educate Dalits. Therefore, they can become aware about their financial empowerment and take necessary action at their individual level, at their family level, at their community level, and also at their national level. to become economically empowered, it is also important for Dalits to decrease their high dependency on traditional jobs. They need to be capacitated with different technical and vocational skills so that they can diversify their occupations. And to do so, both the government and the NGOs in Bangladesh and also the international NGO have to come forward. The government should introduce Dalit quota in government job. The government need to increase budgetary allocation for Dalits in annual development budget, and also should take comprehensive development programs for changing the status of financial vulnerability of Dalits. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Siddiqui, for sticking to time. But just quickly, that you have spoken on the spatial segregation, the social segregation and marginalization of these communities, and for strengthening democracy. I think these are some of the actions that you have proposed in ensuring that this doesn't happen, including budgetary allocation, so that we have some schemes to ensure that people are more participatory in the democracy. Thank you very much. I'd like to now invite Mr. Harjeet Singh. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Beena ji, and thank you for the opportunity. I'm going to talk about some of the environmental issues. Of course, we all know the challenges that we face at this very moment. But let me just share a few things few challenges that we face as India and also as the region. We all know how urbanization has increased and how population growth is putting a lot of pressure on the natural resources. We have seen how the development model that we have been following demands much more mining for construction and also for coal, for energy, which has devastated and affected the local environment, as well as some of the long-term impacts that we are seeing in the form of climate change. And we've also seen how agriculture growth in the region as well as in the country has damaged the environment because of the methods that are used for agriculture growth. We have seen how high-yielding varieties have caused soil salinity and damage to the physical structure of soil. And we are also seeing the depletion of groundwater. And it's the way we have been managing, whether we talk about community waste or industrial effluents or chemical fertilizers that we have seen, all have not only polluted the surface water, but also affected the quality of the groundwater. Another challenge that we also see is deforestation. Forests in the region as well as India have been shrinking for several decades. Again, agriculture has a role to play and different kind of land use changes that we have seen. And we have completely ignored the role of communities who have protected forest for centuries. As we speak, I'm in Delhi right now, and we are suffering from air pollution, and there are situations of air and water pollution that we are not even able to deal with. We see filth around us. Solid waste management is becoming a major challenge as we have adopted a very unsustainable growth model in the country and the region, and we are still not able to find solutions. So when we talk about some of these environmental challenges, clearly it's the most vulnerable people who face the brunt, who have closest relationship with nature and environment, and they are the ones who suffer from these challenges the most. And as they say, when we talk about the environmental movement and politics in the region, we see there is a caste blindness. In looking at it, we don't really acknowledge the role various communities have played in protecting the environment, or when we degrade the environment, how it affects particular communities in so many ways. And that discrimination continues in all our schemes, whether we talk about development or now when there is an increased awareness of environmental protection, we are still not looking at, as I said, we are cast blind in terms of looking at both challenges as well as solutions to environmental protection. While over the last few years, there's a bit of recognition that how Dalit participation is so important, both in terms of access to natural resources and how it is connected with social justice and human rights. But still, in the environmental movement, you don't find vulnerable communities, particularly Dalit, playing that role, that leadership role, which comes from their connectedness with the environment, or their culture, or their own understanding, whether we call it mythological, you call it anecdotal, their understanding of environment and their relationships. And it is also evident as climate change impacts increase, it is the same vulnerable people, the same people's communities who are socially excluded are going to face these challenges even more. Just until last week, I was in Glasgow, where the conference of parties, or we call COP26, was concluded, and it's very clear that we are nowhere near our targets of keeping the planet below 1.5 degree, which means that, and at this moment we are at 1.1 degree temperature rise scenarios. And look at the kind of disasters we have seen. I just saw massive pictures, devastating floods in Tirupati, and it's not just Tirupati. We are now quite used to seeing floods and unprecedented droughts and landslides and wildfires, and we know that people who are poor, they live in most vulnerable regions, and they are the ones who have least access to basic services, and they are the same people who are the last to receive any support when it comes to emergency relief and rehabilitation services. So while we have been facing some of these environmental challenges for a long time, climate change is going to compound many of these challenges and is going to make it worse. So so in terms of going forward, we have to make sure that how we are going to look at the issue of environment and the environmental movement and politics, keeping people at the center, and particularly vulnerable people. Speaking of climate change, on one hand, it is posing a massive challenge on us as as communities, and particularly the vulnerable communities. But on the positive side, the whole discussion on sustainable development and the way climate change has pushed the global community to start looking at environment not as a hindrance, because that's another thing we have seen in the region. As we know that Asia is one of the fastest growing region in the world in terms of economy, and at the same time we have seen how that growth has caused so many problems, and we have ignored issues of environmental protection. So now with climate change really impacting our lives and our livelihoods, it is evident that we cannot look at environment as an obstacle to the growth that we have been talking about, and it has to be absolutely at the center. So recently, India announced its climate targets, and they do provide a ray of hope, because the way we are moving away from coal to renewable energy sources. But it's very, on one hand, there's a ray of hope, but on the other hand, there is also a danger. Because when we talk about now new pathways of development, clean energy and clean development scenarios, we are not looking at the issues of inequality, social exclusion, and poverty the way we should be putting them right at the center. And when nature, and as we move from fossil fuel based energy to clean energy, it's very important to recognize that the fossil fuel sources are very centralized, are located only in few geographical locations. But when it comes to renewable energy, particularly solar, God has blessed with blessed all of us with that energy source. Of course, some are blessed more than others, but it provides us a fantastic opportunity, because we are talking about democratization, we are talking about decentralization. So imagine now we are moving towards an energy source which is decentralized by design, right? So how can we not use the opportunity of decentralizing, using decentralized power, but also democratize the usage of that energy, and not allow the same energy companies and same big corporations and powers to again control the way they have been controlling coal, oil, and gas, as fossil fuels. So on one hand, as I said, there are a number of environmental challenges that we face. Climate change is going to intensify them much more, but here is an opportunity to really make use of these decentralized sources of energy and bring in the aspects of democracy, so that we demand that the new development has to be far more decentralized and democratized. We cannot just see the same inequality that has been existing and rather increasing, where big companies have been holding most of these resources and marginalizing various communities. I think we have to move towards a transformation. So it should not be just a transition towards clean energy. It should be a transformation of our economies and as well as societies, where resources are equitably shared with the vulnerable communities and socially excluded communities, and how we make sure that they have a role to play in the environmental movement, because we can't just look at environment protection from the eyes of middle class and upper middle class, but the most vulnerable people who have been protecting environment and who live closest to environment and nature, how they can play an important role. So yes, there are challenges, but there's also an opportunity. And I would like to end on that note, that we need to be aware of that and making the best use of that opportunity, and make sure that all our actions now take us towards more decentralized power and democratizing the way we have been functioning and running our economies and societies. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Harjeet Singh. Just to quickly say that, yes, I think the climate change, the climate justice and environmental justice discourse has always been of a certain people, though it's people-centric, but it's only people-centric with keeping certain people in mind. And I think now it's time to really look at that process and see how we can get the participation of marginalized communities, not just Dalits, but Adivasis and minorities and other communities. Thank you very much. I think there are some questions, but we'll take that at the end. I'd like to request Mr. Pirbu Satyani, who is a Fulbright Humphrey Scholar and Minority Fellow of the UN, Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights. He has a master's in philosophy from the University of Sindh and 15 years of experience. He's also the co-founder of Pakistan Dalit Solidarity Network. Pirbu, are you here?
Before we move on to Prabhuji, we have been trying to promote you to the panelist position, but apparently it has been denied from your end. Could you please accept that?
He's here, I think. Pirbu?
Yes, can you hear me?
I can hear you now, but we can't see you.
I don't know, there might be a problem to how to turn on my video, but if you can hear me, that's fine. I think if there is no one. Okay.
Yes, please go ahead. Pirbu, you're on mute again.
Prabhuji, you are a panelist now and you can switch on your mic and video as well.
And you're mute again. You'll have to unmute. Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Binaji, I'm sorry. So I was here just to participate as an attendant, but since Bhagwani ji is not here, so let me share what I have in my mind on spontaneous. So, the topic is challenge to democracy in Pakistan. And the second session is about to focus on the gender justice and access to justice of the Dalit community in Pakistan. Let me share, the little background of the country, because I'm thinking that is very much important. Pakistan is, they're 74 years old now, and the founder of the country is Muhammad Ali Jinnah, and he formed the first, the Constituent Assembly, and that Constituent Assembly was very democratic and inclusive, because we had a good number of, the members from the non-Muslim community. Even, you can see the Jogendranath Mandal, he was the chairperson of that Constitutional Assembly, and the other member from the minority community, such as from Christian, Hindus, and Ahmadi community too. But unfortunately, what happened, that Jinnah, he passed away in 1 year, and then the things started to change. And the objective resolution that came in 1949, that was a little how contradictory, and the people from the minority community, particularly the Jogendranath Mandal, who was the Dalit leader in Pakistan, he opposed that, and the other minority community also. But the prime minister on that time, he assured that you would be the minority community would be the head of the country, like that. But there is no such, and even though that objective resolution became a part of the Constitution of Pakistan in 1956, and the Dalit leader, who was the Jogendranath Mandal, he finally resigned in I think 1950, and he left the country. So this is the situation, and since that we are living in the Islamic Republic of Pakistan. Though the Jinnah's vision was a very secular country where the religious minority had equal rights, and where they can participate and they can go to the church, temple, whatever he had clearly mentioned in his speeches. Let's see the situation of Dalits in Pakistan. The Dalits of Pakistan face multiple forms of discrimination as a non-Muslim in a Muslim state, and as a Dalit at the bottom of the caste hierarchy. If they are women, they are likely to be subjected to gender-based discrimination. The majority are poor and illiterate. Many of them work in a modern slavery as a bonded labor. And crimes against them mostly committed with impunity. As in India, Pakistan Dalits are officially called as a scheduled caste, but without the rights their Indian neighbors, what they enjoy, at least on paper. According to the 2017 census figure of minorities, the number of registered scheduled caste in Pakistan is I think is a 0.9 million. Yeah, it's the 9 lakh almost. But what the researcher and other activists, me, Sonu, and other, who work on the Dalit issues, we think the population of Dalit in the country is around 5 million. In terms of equality and the participation in political share, the majority of Dalit live in remote areas and segregated areas, particularly in the province of Punjab and Sindh, with limited livelihood options. They are often extremely poor, landless, illiterate, and subjected to serious forms of discrimination, including untouchability practices. They are also given the lowest priority if disaster strikes and any relief is distributed. Many Dalit who live in urban areas work as a sanitation worker and often face issues related to their health and safety. They face double discrimination because of their work, caste, and faith. And women sanitation workers face the additional challenge due to their gender. In Pakistan, school textbook portray non-Muslim in a negative terms, and Hindus are depicted as the enemy of Pakistan. Paradoxically, Hindus, Dalits are discriminated against by their majority Muslim population for the religious reasons and by dominant caste Hindu because of their caste status. Despite being the biggest minority group in Pakistan, Dalits have limited access to equal and meaningful political participation. The issue of forced conversion, it's an international issue in Pakistan. Every year, hundreds of Dalit girls and young women in Pakistan are subjected to abduction, forced conversion, and even forced marriages. Thousands of those who work in agriculture area suffer sexual abuse and torture. There are reports that some of the abduction and forced conversion do not lead to marriages, but sexual exploitation, prostitution, and trafficking. The Dalit women subjected to caste-based slavery as a bonded labor are also as vulnerable to sexual abuse. The issue of forced conversion of Dalit girls is particularly serious in Sindh and Punjab, where parents live in fear of losing their daughters to an extent where they prefer to arrange early marriage of them. Such steps may result in even early pregnancies and increased child mortality. According to the estimate, less than 10% of Dalit girls go to school. Limited access to education, employment, and health services perpetuate the cycle of poverty and destitution. A lot of the human rights violation described here is illegal. Even according to Pakistan law, this includes forced conversion and bonded labor. Nevertheless, perpetrators generally get away from with their crimes, as laws are not implemented, especially when the victim belongs to the majority, such as the Pakistan Dalit population. Finally, I would conclude that for us, democracy is a question of human dignity, and human dignity is a political freedom. So I think we work for their first of the human dignity. And then even in Pakistan, like in India, we do have a good legislation, and even in Nepal. But in Pakistan, as such, now we do not have any legislation that can stop the forced conversion and forced marriages in Pakistan. So thank you from my side.
Thank you, Pirbu. I know that it was short notice, but you did very well. So thanks a lot. And thanks for saying that yes, for us, democracy is also having dignity, and how do we have a dignified participation in democracy. Before I conclude, there are one or two questions. I think one question was for Harjeet Ji, and he's already answered it. But one question is for Siddique. Do you have budgetary allocations specifically for Dalits in the country? Siddique, are you here?
Yeah. In every year, Bangladesh government allocates some budget for development of marginalized community, and Dalits are also included as marginalized community, but there is no special budget for Dalits. Only targeting Dalits, there is no budget.
Thank you so much. And the other question was for Mr. Harjeet Ji, which he's already answered, but I'd like to just read it regarding the outcome of the COP26 that just, many of us have been following it, 26 that just got over, where Ajay was asking about the exclusion of marginalized communities, and if you can just take 1 minute to also respond. Thank you.
Yeah, so Ajay, as I mentioned, the focus of Indian government has largely been on mitigation, or what we call going for clean energy and technology and finance. The issue of climate impacts have just been recognized, and we are now beginning to talk about it in the international fora, but still we are a long way to go. Even in India, there are actions that have been taken in terms of setting up National Adaptation Fund, and some projects have started in various states, and states have developed their plans, but we are still far off in terms of looking at impacts on the vulnerable communities and how they can play a role not only in adapting to climate change, dealing with climate impacts, but also in the mitigation sector. As I said, when we are moving towards clean energy, we cannot just see that same companies control now the renewable energy, which is kind of beginning to happen, and we need to really challenge that narrative, how vulnerable communities can play a role in all the environmental challenges that we are facing and the solutions that we can offer. So that's an area where we need to really engage much more. And there are many opportunities now beginning, as I can see another question. So yes, you're right in case of education, information, and how we really shape the economy. If I mention one more line, we are right now talking a concept of just transition, which is about, we cannot talk about a transition to clean energy, as I said, which is going to marginalize people. For example, communities who are engaged in the coal sector, or communities now in the, or indigenous people who have now been made dependent on mining in so many ways. When we are going to move away from that, how we are going to restore the environment, give ensure forest rights to these indigenous people, and how they become part of that transition. So the concept of just transition really opens many doors for us to define it. And this is the opportunity to do that, as government is beginning to even define how it's going to look like in the next few years.
Thank you, Harjit. Father Aloy has said something very pertinent, and I'd just like to read that we have to look at democracy more in terms of decentralizing the economy, education and information, especially in the context of the large corporatization which monopolizes economy, education, information, affecting, therefore, having a much larger impact on the marginalized communities. So I totally agree with that. And, you know, I will go through the recommendations. Before that, I'd like to invite Mr. Tilakaraja, who is an MP from Sri Lanka. If you can please say a few words, maybe take a minute or two.
Tilakaraja, you need to accept our invitation to get promoted as a panelist, please, so that we can allow your mic and video.
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, but can we see?
There's no video option for me.
Oh, okay. Please go ahead.
Okay. Nice to meeting you all again with the Desha Dalit Forum and discussing the daily updates. Yes, I'm sorry that I couldn't participate in full because I'm engaging in my examination with my higher studies. As usual, that we are taking on the Sri Lankan Indian origin Tamil community who are discriminated in various means in Sri Lanka. Just I wish to update some of them from here in Sri Lanka, where the discriminated community by land. As all you know that the Indian origin community is migrated in 200 years back to Sri Lanka. By the British people, they brought us for the plantation sector as workers. But still the journey continues as the bonded workers in the plantation sector without the land rights. Still they have been kept as the captive laborers under the plantation companies without the land rights. So this is the pathetic situation here for the Indian communities, as we can call as them the Dalits, how they have discriminated by work and descent. So that the same industry, the same plantation sector, who are the original people here, indigenous people here in Sri Lanka, they have separated that small holding with the land rights for them and discriminated this 1 million people around the Tamil Indian origin community without land to work for 200 years as the bonded laborers. So that we are towards that rights to be earned from the government of Sri Lanka, to it should be enlightened to the international community that the kind of people, a vulnerable community here in Sri Lanka have been kept like this, so that our each and every activities toward this community will be enhance their life livelihood in here in Sri Lanka. So I request to our colleagues, communities around the world who are working for the Dalit communities, take into this account the community who are living here without land rights and more health, education, and most of the things that we can do, taken up this in forum. But in short, that I'm just mentioning here, the basic right is land rights who are left behind. So that we hope that SDGs, even to refresh itself in the post-COVID scenario, during the COVID situation, even they had to work as a plantation workers. So the leave no one behind, the SDG core value will be applied. I hope they will be applied for this community, and we are together with the solidarity, all other Dalit communities all over the world. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, sir. I think that's really important. Ichal has asked a question from the Asia Democratic Network as what is it that the regional and global communities can do to end this, considering that it's such a complicated issue. So I'd request Paul Divakar, if you can just take a minute to respond to that. A minute, please, because we are running out of time. Thank you. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Binaji. I think one of the things that we have seen in country after country, sorry, one second. Is that we have across the Asia and also in other countries, that the rights of the communities as citizens, communities discriminated on work and descent, Dalits, we have heard, whether it's Pakistan, whether it's India, whether it is Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Nepal, Malaysia, and I think several other countries we have probably not have seen, like for example, Afghanistan, there are, but not only Asia, but across the world have been completely excluded. And therefore, I think it is time, while we do the national work, the Asia Democracy Network should push for a UN declaration on the rights of the communities discriminated on work and descent. And I think some of the suggestions have come, and I request Bina to see some of those elements are brought into this declaration. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. A very big thank you to all the participants of this panel. Just to conclude, I'll take a minute more just to give my concluding remarks. There are about 260 million people spread across several countries over the world, which come under this category of people discriminated by work and descent. So it's not a small number. Due to restrictions, due to prohibitions, and the existing violence that is ensuing, they face routine and extreme forms of human rights violations. Women and children face doubly vulnerable to this violation. Several movements among them have evolved to organize themselves and to address these issues at several levels. So there is an urgent need to demand the deepening of democracy in all Asian countries, and as well as a demand at the UN for the declaration of communities discriminated on work and descent. And some of our recommendations and demands are to give official recognition of those DWD affected communities, countries which have not been identified, to bring a common human rights framework with strategies to end untouchability and discrimination based on work and descent, to give due recognition to the rights of the growing population of DWD affected children and youth and plan development programs around them, to mandate reservations or quota in employment, procurement, and services in both private as well as public, to establish legal mechanisms with follow-up measures, to evolve a common legal framework with strategies for women facing discrimination based on work and descent. And this should cover educational, economic, and access to land education. To give recognition to the rights and entitlements of the communities, particularly women in all areas, and to look at the framing of international conventions on climate change and to see how we can bring in the aspect of the marginalized communities into this. Political participation, and to establish budgetary allocations so that all of the above can be actually implemented well. Thank you very much. Jai Bhim, Johar, and Salam to everyone. I would now hand over the time to Vinay.
Thank you, Bina. I'm especially grateful to a few amazing people who support is the reason I'm up here right now. I'm here to propose a vote of thanks. Just before that, I'd like to say that democracy in any country will function only when its citizens have both rights and responsibilities. Rights and responsibilities are obviously two sides of a coin that go hand in hand in whatever home, society, state, or country we live in. But what about the millions of CDWD people who spread across all over the world, or for that matter, who are settled in the Asian countries who face discrimination and violence based on caste, whether they enjoy their rights and responsibilities. The event today discussed in length about CDWD and democracy in the Asian countries. And we heard from Bangladesh, India, Nepal, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Malaysia, and other perspectives on access to justice, environmental issues, etc. The speakers have indeed brought out concerns of Dalits in the countries which affect the functioning of the democracy. Unless and until their concerns are addressed, we will not be able to have a strong democracy. With the discussion lead to the point that there is an urgent need to demand deepening the democracy in all the Asian countries, which is more inclusive, and also demand for a UN declaration on the rights of CDWD. I would like to thank both the moderators, Sonoji and Bina Pallikal, and not naming everyone in special, but to all the esteemed panelists for their time and the wonderful presentations. And I would also like to thank for the draft recommendation presented by Binaji. I would like to thank ADN for providing us the opportunity to reflect upon such a relevant theme when governments are putting the rights of the vulnerable communities at stake. I would especially like to thank Ichal, Mandeep Singh, and Karel for helping us in conducting the event smoothly. Dipanshu Rathore deserves a special appreciation for coordinating all the coordinating and anchoring the entire process. I'd like to thank ADRF Secretariat colleagues, all the ADRF associates and partners for their time and consideration for making this meeting a success. Thank you, interpreters, Siddharth and Suraj. And last but not the least, I wholeheartedly thank all the participants who took time to join us today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Vinay, Paul, Bina.
Ichal, can you say two words about the assembly that is coming? I think it would be good. We are all here.
Yeah, thanks for those who are still staying. So this Democracy Assembly will be held on November 23rd, not November 23rd, 24th, and then we're going to report all the sessions that we are already held, including this discrimination, democracy and discriminations, and perhaps the issue of Dalit can be understand more by the communities, because still many people not really familiar with this issue. So I will make sure the recommendations from the session will be reported during the second plenary sessions. And of course, I will be very happy if can put one article in our recommendations that we will becoming outcomes of these forums. So